Hello, this is David Murray making a video for PokerSpot.com. This is the fourth and final video in my series of an introduction to Heads Up Pot Limit Omaha. So I'm playing two tables here on PokerStars. One is 50 cent $1, one is $1 $2. I'm playing both against the same guy, and I've played about 100 hands already, just warming up for this video. And it was kind of interesting to play against. He started off kind of just loose passive, calling everything pre-flop on the flop in a few turns, then blasting the river quite a lot. He's kind of changed a little bit. He's become more aggressive, more spewy on the earlier streets as well. Certainly in the last 50 hands or so, because he's been losing quite badly. So, in this video, the idea was to sum up everything that I've talked about in the other videos. Of course, in a heads-up situation, more than any other, the situations you get into are coloured a lot and depend a lot on your opponent. So, just really all I'm going to be able to do is talk about how to handle this guy and see how we go against this guy. And, after that, well, maybe at some point to move on, play a different player if this guy doesn't want to play anymore. So I'm donking quite a lot of flops when I've actually got a bit of a hand. I'll just fold this with no real back draw. He's raised me once or twice, not that often. I haven't been three betting very much from the big blind. No particular reason not to against this guy. One reason is that he is playing quite badly, and he's actually we're actually quite shallow on all the tables. So so I do want to play some flops with him. Not sure if I handled this hand right. He is adapting a little bit. Maybe he is starting to raise a bit more on the flop when I donk into him like this. Actually, what even happened pre-flop? He did raise and I called, yeah. Or did he limp and I raised? Anyway, I'll let these go. Maybe I'll just check raise them more to make up for it. Even though I said he's been calling a lot of flops, I have been continuation betting a lot. Well, it's nice to have a hand that can actually back into a straight like this. I think this hand is good enough to bet again over here. And I really do expect it's the best hand here. I mean, he hasn't been that tricky with made hands. I certainly do think he would have played like ace-8 or whatever much more powerfully, much more strongly on the flop. Well, here's a rare hand. It's bad enough to fold. Again, I could consider raising this. When we're so shallow, I'd rather just see some flops. Really, I suppose I kind of want to bust my double him up and play some poker a little bit deeper, a little bit more money. I think he will rebuy if he goes bust. Okay, I had been needing this a bit. I think I might just check and call. My plan here against this guy would be to give up on the turn. I think a lot of the time he's going to check back. And then to the river, I'll check and decide. I say if he does bet here, I'll just give up. I think I should lead this one since he didn't raise pre-flop. There's no reason to expect he'll raise. He said different raise sizes on the flop. Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter because I've got such a good hand. I want to get it in anyway. But I suspect that this min raise is a little bit weaker than his bigger raises. and just hammer it in now in the turn. Come on, I think he's gonna rebuy. Okay, rebuy for 60. One thing I don't like about the Star software is that um, if the game stops like this, if all the players but one go bust, you can't check the last hand very easily. So I would like very much to see what he had, but oh, maybe we can do it through this. Um, yeah, I'll just bring this in. Actually, I'll just tell you what he had, rather than um, mess up the screen. Or maybe it's just getting tilty and 3-betty. I think I'll just call here and let him blast the turn again, and just fold this one. In a lot of situations, I would have just raised all in on the flop here, but here I think it's more likely than average just to blast away with nothing. Okay, well he didn't have nothing, but still, um, it sounds good enough to have a go with. And overpair, not flush draw now. All right, he's gone away in this table, so I might have to find some new players for you. Don't really like this turn spot. If we were a bit shallower, I'd just get it in one way or the other. Well, now I definitely don't see any value in betting here. I think I can call here. He might have a king. Okay, he might also have 2 pair, but I think he bluffs there on the river a lot of the time. Oh yeah, that hand where I flopped bottom set. He had ace 4 4 6, so the board was 5 3 10. So yeah, I had an open and a straight draw. You're probably not too interested in that anymore anyway. Just give this guy up. I probably should have bet the flop. Okay, let's see if I can find another table. Yeah, I see a guy here. Well, this is a nice flop, I guess. I have to just bet. We're so deep, he does want to call some of the time. Even the queen there isn't so good for me because if it was ace ace 6, he might be more likely to peel one off with queens or jacks or something. Alright, we've got another table coming in here. And paired board, obviously, no pair. I'll call this anyway. I do think hitting an ace or king is likely to be good here, as well as obviously a diamond, but I'm just folding now. So this guy, loose flop chaser, that's nice to know. I've no idea if I made that note heads up or not. Most likely not, because I mostly don't play heads up. But well, we'll get to see what he's like. All right, an early 3-bet. Fold this guy. Top pair big kickers here. Certainly going to call this. See what the turn brings. A couple of straight draws. Might check raise this guy. I certainly don't expect. Well, yeah, I think I'll hammer away at this. I might be getting involved a little bit too much here. Here, what to do? Okay, I was gonna call and see what the river brought. I think I'm just gonna fold. That it's likely he has actually got something. Enough of the time. It's not really a spot where I want to be trying to bluff the river, and I think I may get bluffed on the river too much. I'm not going to call him, and when he does have something, I think he would have something enough if he barreled the river to for me to want to fold then. But maybe he's more aggressive than I was thinking, and I should be getting involved in those spots. It's kind of hard to know because I haven't played against this guy, or well, I don't remember much about this guy. Right, he's definitely playing a lot more aggressively than I was expecting. This isn't a bad spot, I think, to three bet him here. I think a small, well, that's obviously not good. I was going to say, I think a small flush is a very likely hand for the small raise in the flop. Uh, well, this is just not. I'm gonna have to call this one bet, but I'm not. I'm not interested in bluffing the river if he checks or min bets or whatever here. Um, I'm just intending to give up. Like I say, I was thinking it was a decent spot to re-raise the flop, and I would because I would generally play a nut flush in the same way there. Um, of course, I would sometimes just call there with a nut flush as well. Um, but this is probably a good spot to catch some bluffs if he's going to go for it. No, could just bet the flop here, but it is very coordinated. Um, and I probably will call the river. I think, yeah, I mean, obviously it's a 10 is quite a likely hand for him to have, but there hasn't been any money going in, and he could have anything. He could even bet two pair here for value, I think. I kind of scared about trying another spewy bluff on this guy. I think I'll just fold. First instinct there was that maybe I should just check raise him on the turn there. And another weird min raise like this. Well, now I'm going to fold loud. Someone's come back here. No, I'm not interested in playing this short stack guy here in this table. I just want to play two tables here. No, go away, go away. Let's see what he does with this. Guess I have to lead this out now. Just need to protect my hand. And I'm certainly falling to this guy's check raises. He hasn't been doing that too often recently. And you'll probably notice that my hand selection pre-flop is probably very similar to whatever it was in the other videos. I don't know if this guy's gonna hit and run me here. It's not easy to get these heads-up games going, especially if you want to play guys with more than 20 or 30 big blinds. Okay, I'll try and find another table. What I was just going to talk about is I was going to say hand selection is very similar. The main thing that would affect my hand selection heads up is a player who would 3-bet more than normal. And then obviously I don't open as many hands. Alright, this guy just timed out for whatever reason, so he's coming back. That's good. Okay, I'm gonna 3-bet this guy at least sometimes, so I might as well start here. And 3-bet this guy as well. Now that I've given him enough money to get a decent stack. He definitely does continue a lot in this spot. I'm not even sure if this is worth a bluff on the flop. Maybe I should just give up. And that could be a decent card for me to continue betting because I think he calls with small overpairs a lot. But I'm just chickening out here. and let this go. And again, pretty decent hand at 3-bet. And I can bet on the flop, expect to have the best hand. I can get called by worse. It doesn't particularly mean I want to see a turn. I think I'm just going to check shove here on the turn. I think he's going to bet here quite a lot with bad draws like bear 6-7 and stuff. So, you know, it might look a little bit spewy to get it all in with aces here, but I don't really think so. And well, I was ahead, all right, but not very far. Like he had a pair and had 9 outs or 11 outs or something. I'm having a run of kind of nice hands here. It's probably a good spot to 3-bet, especially since I did show down the aces. Not a great flop for me. Well, I do have a flush draw and straight draw, but about as bad as it could possibly be. I'm certainly going to call this small check raise. And I think I like the spot of bluffing this turn. I'll just fold this despite flush and straight draw, and I am planning to bluff the river as well here. I think he is going to fold enough to make this worthwhile. I have improved to 2 pairs, so I do have some showdown value, but I think oh, that's not good. Alright, I was going to say I think he still calls in the turn there with a lot of 2-pair hands and weak flushes. I wasn't expecting the king high flush to fold, but I thought he might have a smaller flush and he could fold that, or a 1-card straight. It's obviously an error of judgment there. This is nice. Wouldn't really consider slow playing this here because I think he is someone who can give me value if I just keep on plugging money into the pot. Maybe I probably should have bet this flop. Would often bet this flop. I think he doesn't like to fold to me now because he, you know, he's seen me bluffing a couple of times. I'm not going to call this river. It's not good for me. Not only that he's seen me bluffing, but also that he's caught me bluffing and he's doing well. He's going to have a little bit of extra confidence. It's going to make him want to pick me off, want to catch me in spots. I misread this over here. I really should just bet that turn. Ooh, this guy has bluffed a lot on spots like this. Normally he bets a bit bigger. I'm bluffing here. I'm really not sure what to do here. I think I'll just call, but really I think folding could well have been the better option there. And a lot of these are normally pretty decent spots to bluff, but I kind of want to win a big pot against this guy without bluffing first. And you know, get the game swinging back my way. Get him feeling he needs to chase something a bit. And he's slowed down a little bit now, I think. But I don't see any value here. I think I might just check and what? I expect him to check back most of the time here. Battle heading this guy. I think I'll just fold this one. So now, with such a coordinated board, maybe I'm better off to bet here instead of hoping he will bet for me. Only gets it in anyway, so hopefully I'm ahead here. And I am. That's good. I just want to contrast that with similar spots where I had tried to check raise the turn. For example, that time when I had the aces. Two reasons why I thought leading there was better because of the coordinated board. Firstly, because it's such a scary board, it may give him more of an incentive to just to check back and see if he can make something else. That his two pair may be very scared there. Secondly, that well, this doesn't apply quite as much in this comparison between this and the aces hand, but between this and a drier board, it's less of a disaster if he folds there, even though I've got the nuts, than let's say there's no flush draw, no likely two pairs and sets. Even though I obviously want him to get the money in, I may not have so much equity that it may not be so profitable for me to get all the extra money in that I need to do anything to hope that it happens. I'm not explaining that very well, but I might make a post about it if you check the forums. So over here I've got the nuts. I would often just 3-bet the flop here. That's a really annoying card on the turn because almost every card does give me the nuts. I'm gonna check back and bet the river for value or call the river. But, well, actually the way he's played this, I think he's gonna call me here. Oh, well, okay. I was gonna say the way he's played this, it's two most likely hands are either ace-4 or 5-3. I expected both of those hands to call the river. I suppose he could just have had a total bluff. Well, this is kind of a nice way to back into a nut full house when I was barely paying attention. Call one bet here with this straight draw. This is a pretty weak hand here. Could even have folded this pre-flop. Have a go anyway, and fold this to the second barrel. And 3-bet this guy. Can't remember exactly what hands I've shown down that I've 3-bet here, but I mean I feel it doesn't really matter when I'm 3-betting just the same hands I normally do, and just enough to worry him. Well, alright, I've still got a decent flush draw and the straight draw. He would normally play a very big hand fairly fast, I think, on the flop. And the ace could be a scare card because, however often I 3-bet, you can still put me on aces. I don't really think I've got enough outs to call this bet here. Certainly I wasn't planning to call it. No, just when there's a chance that a bigger flush draw is out there, and I almost certainly don't have the best hand at the moment. I think that was a decent spot to fold. Could put a second barrel on this one. I'll just let it go. Yeah, I could even have the best hand here. And yeah, the fact that I could have the best hand there with the sixes is a decent reason not to bluff. I don't know if I would have been expecting him to fold a hand like tens anyway. Just the way this has been going, it doesn't seem that likely. And well, I mean, people continue all kinds of things by their bet sizing, but I don't really know what this guy's telling me. Well, alright, I'm not going to waste my time back by talking about it, but Interesting, this was slightly over a min raise. Previously, he had a min raise on that flop where I'd flopped the wheel. And he probably didn't have very much. I'll just let this go again. Excellent card for me here. I think it's unlikely he slow played Jack Deuce or Jack 10, and it is possible he can have a Jack and get it in with, well, he'll have outs obviously, but I expect to have the best hand. Or okay, he can have a bluff at it either. I don't think he folds the Jack there. And I'm going to check raise this flop actually for a change. And peel one here. And I want to stack off here, but I think I'd prefer the check, give him a chance to bluff at it. And I think I'll call the river. Maybe there's more to be had from shoving the turn. Well, a small bet here. Well, I'm not folding here. It's just a question of is there value to shove. I don't know. Does he really want to miss that value by only betting 74 if he's got a big flush? I think there's a chance to get a bigger flush, but it's worth. I think he made the right call. I think he's a smaller flush more often, and obviously a fair amount of time he's bluffing. He doesn't have a flush at all, but that evens out either way. He doesn't call. Ooh. I've got a monster in this flop. I think I'll just plow it in. It's possible he does fold. Okay. Didn't expect him to fold, but I thought it was a possibility. And really, I'm just not getting through this guy a lot over here. I think I'm going to bet this though. I think he calls with a draw a lot on the turn. Because he doesn't expect me to have a queen. He's bluffed these cards before. To have a go here or not. I think I'll just give up. Although I'm already second guessing myself. Wow, okay, he's king queen. Well, that was kind of unexpected. He's been, any hand like that, he's been wanting to play fairly fast. So, well, I'm certainly glad I didn't bet it now, but and I flop a straight. Not the best straight in the world, but just call. Where's that? Get rid of this. Yeah, that's a really terrible card for me, obviously. I was kind of happy with my straight until that card came up. Well, I suppose it could have rescued me either, but certainly that wasn't the card I was hoping for. I can 3-bet this guy. And how we go with this flop. I could just fold this thing pre-flop as well. This is probably a bad raise, slightly tilty raise here. Double suited queens, decent hand to 3-bet here. Let's fold this guy. And it's a decent flop. Bad straight draws, bad flush draws. And now 2-pair. I think I'll just check back. I think he still peels a lot of stuff here. And well, certainly with the intention of calling this river, probably betting it for value. Certainly going to call here. I think it was more of a decision if he checked. But yeah, no, actually, no, not a decision if he checked either. I think there's enough of a chance if he looked me up with the straight there, that I definitely have to bet my small flush. Could have checked this, but mix it up a little bit. And let's let this go. Pretty weak hand here. Not really in the habit of folding the 3-bets though. Obviously that's not a great flop. I mean, it's not even a great flop to float and try and take it away, I think. Not sure what the bet sizing means there. It's, we could very easily have nothing or an ace. It makes sense either way. Just let that go. And well, I mean, I think the lone ace isn't worth a whole lot in this this battle, but there's just a chance he doesn't have anything at all, so it's always worth betting there. And well, 2 pairs and a straight draw, certainly worth having a bet. And here, big enough turn bet. Just let it go. I think I mean I have to hit exactly my hand. It's not a well, I do have 7 as well, but it's not. I'm not going to win enough with 2 pair there. I think to justify calling to try and hit the straight or the flush. And it's kind of nice to hit the nuts over here. Not a great flop to get action on though. Certainly don't have to 3-bet this hand, but from time to time it's worthwhile. He had been bluff raising these flops, I think, a bit earlier, but not very much recently. So I'm not sure what I was going to do if he had bluff raised that Queen 8-8 flop. Let's always open this hand and heads up, but yeah, okay, I'll call this 3-bet. And okay, it's been relatively passive 3-betting. Not necessarily sure in this guy's case if that limits him more to having big pair hands. It often would. I would say that's not necessarily so in this case because this guy has been kind of imaginative and bluffy. But either way, I don't think it's a great flop to continue on with just so few outs to make 2 pair. Or well, to make a useful 2 pair. And yeah, well, I mean, given that I said it wasn't a good flop to get action on earlier, you'd think that I would have to bluff it when I don't have very much. Even though I turned that flush draw, I don't really like giving more action in this situation. He does probably have to have something worthwhile to call me with. And that's obviously a good flop. And now what? Well, no bet from him on the river. Doubt he's trapping me, although it's obviously possible. He wasn't, that's good. Wonder what he had. I'll just read it out to you. 8 deuce 4 jacks, end up with an 8 high flush, okay. Have a bluff here. That's... Well, it's sometimes a good card to continue here. I think this guy looks me up with any pair, certainly any pair higher than 7s or so. So I'll just let it go. I'd have a chance where I wanted to double barrel him off it, but I don't really think it was worthwhile there. Let's check this guy back since I have got a kind of nut draw. I'll let it go now. Could have bet that flop as well. Maybe that was better. I'm certainly calling this guy down here. Probably going to fold the river. Okay, small two pair. Well, I mean, I think the insta check back on the flop is, it can be faked, but it is quite a good tell. That he probably really didn't have anything, and may have just hit the check fold button. I don't know. I was saying that the lone ace isn't really worth a whole lot in a heads up game like this, where we're playing very both players are playing fairly loose. Just a lot of thin value with like worse hands than that. Um, However, it's still, if I'm gonna ever check raise bluff that flop, and I am, I should. Um, that's the time I should do it. That's the time is least likely to have, well, a flush of any sort is when I hold the ace, because the ace is the most likely flush card for him to have. And here I could have played this hand even stronger. I suppose could have. Well, I wouldn't really raise the turn, but I suppose I could have bet the flop. Um, Maybe could have got more value there. Probably not actually. Let's let this guy go. Earlier in this, I would certainly have called this without thinking too much. Well, it's kind of tough. I think I let it go. Well, I think he's just value betting enough hands to make up for the times he's bluffing here. That he's able to value bet his, probably even stuff like King 6. I let it go. Call this one with a nut draw of some sort. No, I was saying I was wary of bluffing these spots, but I don't want to totally give up on representing flushes just because he's looked me up once or twice. So slightly almost surprised to get through there. And well, it's min check raise. Wouldn't it be nice to know exactly what it meant? But I'll just let it go. Could turn there probably decent spot. But I think the river is still an okay spot to bluff here, because I really have nothing, and all I need is him to fold his pocket eights or something. And well, a third pair and a straight draw could be worth a bet. And betting again. I don't think so. I think hands with an ace in it are a lot of his range. That's I was going to say that he might look me up with an ace, so certainly I suppose I have to think he would look me up with two pair. Worth betting here. Yeah, he's folded a few recently. It's hard to know whether that's because he hasn't had very much or not, or that he's just given up floating so much. Bluff this river when all I want to fold out is an overpair here. No, I think it's hard to see how I win this pot though. What hands can he have here? Now bet here. I think I might try and check raise him. I don't know if he's going to bet here, but I mean, normally what I would say here is I would prefer to bet these spots just because, especially in the turn, just because you want to get that extra bet in on the river. It's not impossible that he will call a check raise though. Even on the river, it was worth considering. I think that he would bet and then decide I could be spewing with something worse. If he actually had a small flush, which didn't seem that likely. But on the other hand, what am I trying to get him to look me up with anyway? Two pair, I suppose. Worth betting here? Probably not. And just fold to that small bet. And check call, lead this turn. He's done this a couple of times as a bluff, as I recall. Not really on this kind of board. In other circumstances, I would be tempted to raise this. Against this guy, I'm just a little bit wary of doing anything totally spewy like that. I think there's always a chance he would look me up with a lower flush. It's worth having a go on this flop, especially when I have a 10. Value over here is very thin. I think it might even be better to check back. I mean, it's just, what could he actually call me with that's worse? A smaller 2. But it's not out of the question he would have checked a flush or a straight. I think I'm gonna call down here. Not sure what I think of that card. It does obviously give me a straight. It does complete a flush as well. I think I would almost have preferred like a blank, like a 7 of clubs or something. I think if flush is possible, well, okay. Did he have an ace? No, he didn't. So, I was right in that I was well ahead. Not really sure what to think of that hand. Well, I mean, my plan there was that I was just going to call the river as well, if it was a blank. But really, that queen is actually one of the cards that might have made me change my mind. Alright. Well, I mean, I don't see any play here other than calling. It's just a question of what I'll do in the future streets. Small bets. He has done this, well, hasn't this with, well, he made small bets with what was the second nut flush before, now Australia's second nut flush. And this is annoying. Again, earlier in the game I would have snap called this. I was planning to call a river bet. Not sure what I think of this big river bet though. I think it might be time to call. I think I have to call it. It could be even a total bluff. It is, okay. Yeah, I'm really not even sure if that was the right call there. I mean, despite the fact that it obviously worked and he obviously is capable of doing that. I was getting the feeling that he could be doing it with the nuts. I think I'll just call him here with this again. Give him another chance. Well, that's actually a card that might make me lead out. Things that I can't really check raise here. I'm going to call, and again, I'm going to let him bluff the river. Yeah, I didn't actually expect him to bluff the river all that much, but I really didn't expect to get paid off if I let out. By hands that wouldn't have bet the river. Well, just out of interest, what did he have? Well, he had 8s, which would be, a bluff catcher at absolute best. And well, here I've got the nuts. Worth a bet. I don't think he's been particularly floaty in this spot, has he? So, well, what now? Is it worth checking? I don't think so. I don't think he makes a move with this pot enough to just check. I think I'd be better off to bet and hope that he thinks it's weak and sticks me in. Okay, that's an acceptable result. And finally, this session is looking a little bit better. Well, I was going to quit pretty shortly, but now, of course, I don't really want to quit. That got a bit more momentum going on both tables. Both of these guys might start getting a bit desperate. I think just checking this river was best. I'm not sure even what I would do against a bet. Certainly going to call here against this smallish check raise. I think I'd fold to a big barrel here. Uh, hmm, what to do against the 2/3 pot barrel? Uh, I'll call one more time, and well, of course, one thing is that I could hit a straight flush. Uh, Now, of course, I'm really hoping he had the king high flush. If he has a king high flush, it doesn't really matter what I do. I'm sure he's not going to just call, so I may as well bet this big. Wow, this is so sick. He can't really have the king high flush, and he can't be considering just calling, can he? What do you think about it? I'm gonna bluff here all the time. Am I? Well, maybe I'm not actually. This is okay. I don't believe what he's saying here. This is well, this is very impressive if he does, but I think he's got the lone king so much at the time. I better tell him I didn't have 8-9. Well, okay, I thought he just wanted to hear one way or the other or he'd leave. I don't know what to think now. I mean, that's, an ultimatum like that. Maybe he really did have it. Really does want. Certainly wants me to think he had it. I don't know. I feel like I could have. I've been spewy enough. I could have turned a set or two pair into a bluff there, couldn't I? Could have bet my. Well, there's so many clubs on the board. Could I bet my queen high flush for value? Were there enough smaller flushes? Probably. Now I'm not sure what I should have told him, and I'm not sure anything about that hand. It's probably a good spot to leave it at. Don't really want to go find another table. There's been some interesting spots. Hasn't been quite what I would have liked, but I think there's been some good stuff to see. And if you, in combination with the other videos, I think you'll find some interesting stuff throughout all of this. So I say that's all for now. I'm going to move on now and do a presentation to sum up the whole series. So this is the presentation to conclude my series on PokerSpot.com on an introduction to Heads Up Pot Limit Omaha. So in this presentation, it's going to be, I think, 6 slides with content on them. It's going to be an introduction, which will be actually quite a detailed introduction, and my thoughts about the game, and my thoughts about Heads Up in general, and then we'll go through each of the streets in turn. So, Heads Up Poker, I think it's a very pure game, a very pure contest. Almost all games or sports are played between two players or two teams. Whether you have something like chess or tennis, where it's normally just one-on-one, as it is in poker, or you have a game like football or bridge, where there's lots of players, but there's only two teams, two sets of players who are um, all of whose interests are aligned with their teammates. So poker is kind of different in that it can be played with more players. With 9, 10, 11 players. Or Omaha can be played with at most 11 players. Hold'em games can be played with, lots more. But typically, I suppose, it's often played with 6 to 9 players. And this complicates the strategy a lot because you might want to do one thing against one player, but you're not able to because you risk exposing yourself to a different player. You can imagine how, well, let's say if a football game with 3 teams, you can one team might be pinned back defending, and you need to throw all your guys forward to attack against them. But you're going to leave yourself very loose if the third team gets the ball somehow. That's maybe not a very good analogy. I don't know how most of these games just wouldn't work very well with three teams. I can't even think what a three-handed tennis court would look like, for example. But anyway, heads up poker. It takes a lot of those complications out of the game. It makes it simpler in many ways. It just makes it a straight up fight, mano a mano. Um, Something that's often said about the game is that it's high variance. I mean, firstly, variance isn't the worst thing in the world. In fact, there's sometimes when it could be good. I mean, you know, lots of people pay money to experience variance. They're willing to sacrifice some expectation to experience variance. That's why people buy lotto tickets, or why most people go to the casino. However, if you're relying on a game for um, a profit for a weekly wage, a monthly wage, variance is not usually a good thing, and I mean investors as well in the real world also do try to minimize risk. If certainly if it's possible to minimize risk without decreasing expectation. Anyway, that's not really what I want to say. Mostly what I want to say is that conventional wisdom has it that Heads Up Omaha is a very high variance game. I don't think this is necessarily true. It is true that a very wild Heads Up game can be very high variance, and wild Heads Up games are wilder than the wildest six max games. It's unusual to get six guys who are absolutely nuts, but you could get two. And again, it kind of comes back to the idea that it's you can do whatever you want without worrying about getting exploited by the third person who it could be doing something else. When it's Heads Up, sometimes you get two wild players who just they feel much freer to go at it. But in general, I think it's not necessarily high variance. Also, a higher win rate is possible playing Heads Up in general, which effectively lowers your variance for two reasons. Firstly, if your variance stays the same and your win rate goes up, your the relative variance goes down. I suppose you could consider it to liken it to moving up double stakes and have the same win rate in dollars, but you'd have double the variance. Whereas if you stay the same stakes and double your win rate, you'll have the same variance. Also, if you happen to be winning a lot, it's a couple of little swings don't hurt. If you expect to win $10,000 over a set time and you run $10,000 below expectation, that's okay. It's much better than if you were expecting to earn 2,000 and running 10,000 below expectation. The swings have less of an effect if you're winning a lot to make up for it. One thing that does increase variance in the game is tilt. It's certainly easy to tilt playing Heads Up. It's certainly easy for your opponents to tilt. Tilt does kind of make the game higher variance. Anything that, mathematically speaking, generally, if consecutive hands are strongly correlated, if the results of the hands are likely to go together, it's going to increase variance in general. So if all the hands are kind of mixed up, that you expect to be if you win over the next 20 minutes, does that affect whether you're going to win over the 20 minutes after that or not. In a heads-up game, in a tilty game, it is much more likely that it does, that one player could just go and tilt and go and dump off a lot more money. And of course, that can increase variance as well. And obviously, the thing to do about that is um, make sure it's your opponent who's tilting and not you. So heads up poker in general and heads up Omaha is kind of all about figuring out how your opponent thinks. Just figuring out what he's likely to have, how he plays. Ideally, your opponents play badly, hopefully very badly. If they play very well, you should find new opponents. You shouldn't play those guys. So you should think about, why do they play badly? For example, do they want to call every hand? Do they want to bluff every time they get to the river and end up with nothing? Do they get scared of money, scared in big pots, and find it difficult, or don't get value from their non-nut hands? Those are three very simple examples of what could be major leaks. And that does sound a bit black and white, but there are a lot of players out there who you can just categorize and say, yes, this guy does exhibit that leak or that one, or some other one that's equally simple, or it could be something a little bit more subtle. Final thought for this slide is that I'm not trying to give anyone a formula for playing heads up. I can't even think of the idea of writing down a formula for, this is how you should play. So instead, this series has been giving you examples of how I play, but also it's just going to give you stuff to think about. Well, I've talked about specific hands during the series because I've been playing specific hands. I haven't really had a choice, and that's good. That is good to see that. But during this presentation, I'm not going to talk about any specific hands. I'm barely going to mention the words flush or straight or anything like that. Just going to speak in very vague generalities. And I kind of feel that this is the way to. This is important. That if you don't have more questions and more thoughts, more unresolved questions after watching this video series than you did before, then I've probably done something wrong. It probably hasn't been a great success. So with that, let's move on to the questions and the kind of things that I want you to think about pre-flop. Alright, so this kind of contradicts what I was saying. I have got a little bit formulaic here. You'll have noticed during the videos I wasn't using a HUD, any kind of stats display. I think they're very good, very useful. I just, for various reasons, haven't used one, and I haven't used to using one recently. Also, I don't play a lot heads up, so I don't even know what my numbers are here for opening and defending. I made these numbers up about 10 minutes ago when I was writing the presentation, but I think it's about right. It is, in general, against an average opponent in these small stakes, small to mid stakes that I was playing, I would open most hands, but not all in position. Occasionally a hand will come along that's just too bad to play. So I would say you should be playing 75%, 80%, 85%, maybe even more. We'll get to that in a second. In position on the button. Out of position. Well, this is assuming the other guy's raised and that he's a relatively similar range for opening. Defend a good few hands, top 40% or maybe more, and 3-bet some good hands. It's pretty much up to you how many and what good hands you want to 3-bet. It's a matter of style. I've heard some people suggest just don't 3-bet at all. Just don't ever make the pot bigger out of position. I do like to occasionally pop it up a little bit. It should open less, and this means obviously less often, not for a smaller amount. I guess something I haven't mentioned at all in this presentation, and I'm not really going to talk about much, is bet sizing. Pre-flop, I generally just open for the pot. So yeah, open but less often if you're going to get 3-bet all the time. You don't want to get in big pots with awful hands, and you certainly don't want to be folding 50% of the time. well, you don't want to be putting money in and then folding. And open more often if he's not defending much, if he's going to throw his hands away. This is all really kind of trivially self-obvious, isn't it? And finally, defend a little bit more against weaker players. That should be kind of obvious as well. You want to play more pots, even though it's heads up, and you could say, well, I won't. Let's just fold. Let's move on to the next hand where I can play my button. You need some kind of really idealized fish for that to be right. That he's just going to stay until all his money goes, no matter what. That's not true. I think I like to make the most of every hand, and if the hand is profitable, play the hand. And if he's a bad player, your hand is more likely to be profitable, even if it's a bad hand. Flop, I've divided this into in and out of position. In position, generally we're assuming that you've raised and he's called you. Obviously, there's other ways it could have gone. I continuation bet a lot. Just because you pick up the pot a lot, often you have something. When you don't, it's good to bluff some of the time. Of course, you shouldn't always continuation bet. The main reason to not continuation bet, to check back in position, is if you are worried about getting check raised. And in general, two things have to be true for you to be worried. Firstly, you have to have a hand that does not want to be check raised. For example, it could be some marginal draw that just wants to see another card and make the nuts, especially against a loose player. And secondly, he has to be relatively likely to check raise you. So that's, again, like I say, I'm not big into the stats, but certainly that would be a useful stat to have playing heads up. Check raise flop percentage. Does he check raise a lot? Does he bluff check raise all his monsters? Whatever. Anyway, you should think about that. That's probably the most important thing to think about when you're going to bet the flop. On the other hand, if you've been donked into, if he's, I use the word donk here to mean that he leads the flop after calling the previous street out of position, so it's not pejorative or anything here. I like to call a lot. If you've absolutely nothing, fold, because most of the time you will have something, you have some kind of pair, some kind of draw. Call because I guess most players they don't have a if you call a lot, you'll still be in good shape a lot of the time. You're in the turn, you're in good shape for the rest of the hand. You can hit another card to improve your hand. You can take away the pot unimproved. And I mean, if you're not going to be calling a lot, or if you are going to be continuation betting a lot against a loose player, you similarly want to be calling a lot. When you're betting, it's not just to pick up the pot straight away, it's also put more money in the pot and be in a good position on the turn. In a slightly bigger pot, you may have a worse hand if he's got a tight range for leading into you, but still you're in position, and a lot of good things can happen. Flop play out of position. Some questions here to think about, and these kind of questions are. This is the format that I've put on the rest of the slides as well. It has got a lot less formulaic from here. So does your opponent continuation bet a lot? Most do. That's again a pretty obvious stat to have if you're going to have a HUD playing heads up. Does he float you a lot? If you donk into him, is he going to call you? We're going to get to exactly what that might mean, what the implications that might be for the turn in a minute. But and certainly if he does, that'll be one reason not to bluff very much. On the other hand, it might mean you'd want to get thin value. Often you're going to have the question of whether it's better to lead or check raise. That's a question that will very often come up when you're playing the flop out of position. And these are things that come up, things that you have to think of when you're making that decision. Does he bet a lot? If he doesn't bet a lot, it's going to be hard for you to check raise. Maybe you just want to check anyway. You don't mind another card coming off. If your hand isn't vulnerable, or if your hand wouldn't mind seeing another card. Then does he float a lot? Is he going to call your bet, and will he bluff raise you? I found it wasn't particularly common that I wasn't really getting bluff raised in that situation a lot in those games there on Stars. But it's certainly something to consider. You know, you don't want to be leading and constantly getting snapped off with a raise. And it's something that is very frustrating if you do that. You know, however well you try and balance your range, still most of the time you're going to have a marginal or bad hand, and you wish you just went away. You don't want to get raised. Moving on to the turn. The turn, while the money is bigger and it's a more important street in that way, I think the turn owes an awful lot to the flop. You know, you can kind of narrow down what the guy has based on the flop play. That should tell you a lot about what you want to do in the turn. So, you know, does he call the flop light? Did he float you? And if he does call the flop light, is it because he just wants to see another card? Does he want to fold now? Does he want to give up? You know, should you try and bluff the guy off the pot again? Or on the other hand, if it's him who's been betting, does he second barrel you a lot? With well, especially with nothing. You should also think of his tendencies. With a good hand, is he likely to lead flop and try and check raise turn? And let's move on then to the river. And again, there's some more questions here. So if you're faced with a big bet from your opponent on the river, well, your main thought is going to be, do I have the best hand? Should I call? If you're going to raise for value, that's that's often quite obvious. You've got a very good hand, so it's one less thing to think about. So really, the interesting decisions are more when you've got a marginal hand or a bad hand. Bluff raising to river is obviously possible as well. Yeah, there are some spots for it. But again, it's all going to come down to, is he bluffing? Is he bluffing? Is he betting because he's got a monster? Can he bet tin hands for value? There's a difference between players who will find tin value in small pots and in big pots. On one level, it makes sense that it should be a bit more cautious in big pots because there's been strength shown earlier on. But if the nuts have changed a lot, or if a lot of money went in earlier that wasn't very meaningful to the pot, or to the hand strength now, for example, pre-flop, then even so, a lot of players will be more cautious about getting in a load of money on the river without a big hand. They won't be betting their weak straights and their weak flushes for value in the same way. That is in general a leak, something you should look out for, and something you should just think about, just how thin is your opponent betting for value, and just how often is he bluffing. Then you figure out if you want to call him or not, or maybe you want to raise instead. The other typical river decision is, should you bet? So obviously, if you get a really good hand, you should probably bet. I guess you could check raise if you're out of position, and you've reason to think that he'll bet and maybe call a check raise. I guess that's another option. But main decision is usually, should I bet for value here? So if you get a really good hand, then obviously yes. If you've got a marginal hand, it depends on a couple of things, which I'm going to get to in a second. This distinction between loose callers and loose chasers, and also if you're bluffing is going to depend on the same thing. If you should bluff or not, if you can reasonably represent the hand, or even if that matters, if he's going to call you or not. So this loose chasers versus loose callers is something I mentioned, I don't think in this video series, but in some other one. Where it's a little bit too convenient for us to categorize people as just loose player. And certainly these two types of loose player do go hand in hand and are often found in the same person and the same player. But not necessarily. What I'm talking about, a loose caller is someone who calls down with their hand that has, say, marginal showdown value. They want to catch bluffs. They want to go to the river. They want to see showdowns. And obviously that's someone you shouldn't bluff very much. Well, you should bluff them if you think they don't have a hand anyway, but certainly you should be bluffing them less often than other players. And distinct from loose chasers who will call down with weak draws, or even made hands like overpairs and so on, but who are often willing to fold the river, who are just happy to call down to hit a miracle card or hope you give up on the river. Yeah, that's that last thing, especially something you should look out for, players who want to call you down on a turn, call a big bet on the turn, planning to just check fold the river with their overpair, bad two pair, or good two pair, or it could be a flush or a straight in a different circumstance. Obviously, that's something you have to do a lot yourself. Sometimes you kind of just got to call a turn and fold the river. But if you can find players who make a habit of it, that's really good. You get all their money in on the turn, and then they still don't ever get to win the pot on the river. But yeah, that's the last thing I want to leave you with. Just think about that different distinction. That's something I mentioned when I was taking notes that I didn't really like to write just loose without clarifying it a little bit more. That's basically it for this presentation. It's gone on a little bit longer than expected, but yeah, I think you should you should have maybe had some questions answered, and of course you've got a lot more questions now to ask and a lot more things to think about. So best of luck and goodbye.